to have equations given to you in what we call standard form. So I wrote it over here down the side. But anytime that we have standard form, if they ask us to graph the equation, we can't graph it unless it's in the form that you guys had yesterday. So it has to be slope-intercept form. Okay, so I'm going to show you the 2 steps it takes. Like at most, there are just 2 steps that we would have to use in order to change this equation. So notice it's standard form because we have x and y on the same side. Yesterday in slope-intercept form, the letter y was completely by itself and the x term was over here. So I'm going to have to do 2 steps to get this x term over here and to somehow get rid of that -3 that's in front of the letter y, because we don't want it to say -3y equals, we want it to say y equals. Okay, so step number 1, we are always going to get rid of the x term. So this x term, we want it over here. And in order to do that, it would be no different than if I said, how do you move a 2? How do you move a +2 to the other side? You guys would all tell me that we subtract 2. That's what we've been doing. So if I want to move a 2x to the other side, yeah, let me rewrite the equation. We are going to subtract the 2x to get it over here. Okay, so you might want to watch me first before you actually write down the answer. If I subtract 2x, then on the left side, I have -3y. I bring down my equal sign. Now on the right side, the past couple days when you guys were doing equations, you would actually do -6 minus 2 and you'd put -8. However, are these 2 like terms? One has an x, the other one doesn't. So all we're going to do is we're going to write these 2 terms sideways. And I always put the x term first. So this one right here, the -2x, I would put first. And then the -6, I would just write next to it.
Could you do it the other way?
You can. It's just, remember, we like slope-intercept form to look like this. So we typically see the x term first. That's the only reason I put it first. Okay, so step 1, always move the x term, and it's either adding it or subtracting it. So this one was positive, so we subtracted it. If it had been a -2x, we would have added 2x. Is everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, then step number 2, divide by the coefficient of y. So what that means is, whatever this number is right here, that's the one we have to divide by. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, when it says divide by it, there were 3 terms. There was this term, and this term. And we have to divide all 3 of them by the -3.
Oh, okay. So that is 1.
It'd be 2 rather than -6 divided by -3.
Okay, so these 2 cancel each other out, leaving y. I'm going to bring down my equal sign. Okay, now here comes the trickiest part. This is the hardest part of the whole thing. This first term, this first division, you definitely want to watch as I explain this. This is a fraction right now. This is our slope. So we want to leave it as a fraction, okay? And the other thing you need to notice, do you guys see how this is negative and this is negative? 2 negatives will turn positive. So 2/3, if you did not know that 2/3 does not reduce, you guys remember how I showed you yesterday? You would type in to your calculator. You never want to use the signs on your calculator, by the way. Okay, so on the calculator, you don't ever really want to type in the signs when you're trying to see if it reduces. We already know that it's going to turn positive, so we don't have to worry about that. But to see if 2/3 reduces, hit the number 2. Then you want to hit this ABC button, and then, oops, I hit the wrong button. And then hit the 3, and then hit equals. If it reduced, that 2/3 would have just changed. Well, obviously it didn't change, so we're going to leave it as 2/3, okay? If it did reduce, it would show you the reduced form, okay? So 2/3 x, don't forget to bring that x down with it. And then for this part right here, again, you got to be careful of these signs. You can just type this in as a division problem to your calculator. So we would be taking -6 divided by -3, which is +2. Yep. And now we have the equation written in slope-intercept form because y is by itself. We have a slope in front of x, and then we have the y-intercept.
So what's the end?
So once you get here, they want you to identify our slope. So which one was the slope?
The 2/3.
2/3.
2/3
And then my y-intercept,
is
the +2. And now we have the two things that we need in order to graph over here. Okay, so our starting point is
2.
the 2 on the y-axis.
Yeah.
So you want to go ahead and put that first point on your paper. And then with a positive slope, we're always going to go up and right. So we're going to start at that 2. You're going to count up 2, right 3, and then put a new dot. So up 2, right 3, new dot. Can I do that again? Yes. Up 2, right 3. You should end up in that top right-hand corner. Now I would also go back to my starting point, and instead of going up right, I can go down left a couple times. So I'm going to count down 2, left 3, and then down 2, left 3. So you can actually end up with a total of 5 points. All right. What do you guys think? Is that okay? The good news is you're never going to have to do more than 2 steps. The first step is always add or subtract the x term. The second step, so listen, the second step is the one that sometimes you don't need to do, because what if this had just been a positive y? If that had just been the letter y, would there have even been anything to divide by? No. But since there was a -3 in front of the y, we had to get rid of that. But if it had just said y equals, we would have been fine. We wouldn't have had to do our second step. So it just kind of varies, but you'll never have to do more than 2 steps. I personally feel like the part that people struggle with the most is probably dealing with like the slope and figuring out what the slope's supposed to be and whether it's supposed to be positive or negative. Because unfortunately, if you guys had left this -2/3, your line would have been wrong. You would have been going the wrong way. So you just want to make sure you pay attention to those signs. All right, so we're going to do, oh, just kidding. They worked it out down here. This is the same problem. I always forget they do that. But now you guys can see the exact same process we just did up here. It was already worked out, and you guys got to see it firsthand. And like I said yesterday, I don't like this. I don't like the fact that on this paper there are only 2 points. That's okay if you were graphing on a computer, but you guys know we're not graphing on a computer, so.
Is this right?
Maybe. Okay, flip it over to the back. We're gonna try, I think we'll do 1 and 2 together, and then I'm gonna let you kind of like try 3 and 4 on your own without me, and then we'll go through them just to make sure you guys are understanding it. But for number 1, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually work it out under the graph just because there's not a lot of room up there. So I'm just gonna recopy this down underneath it. There's plenty of space.
Yeah.
So yeah, plenty of space.
Nope.
Okay, so what would my step 1 be to move my 5x?
You have to subtract 5x.
We would subtract 5x
To both sides.
to both sides, or from both sides.
From both.
Yeah.
Okay? So now on the left side, we have 2y that we can bring down and the equal sign. And then on the right side, just like I said before, I personally like my x term written first. So I wrote negative 5x, and then my second term, I would put the minus 10. Do not combine those two.
Wait, why didn't you put negative 5x? So positive 5.
No, remember we just subtracted it.
Oh.
And then we're going to go through and divide everything by the 2.
Now I understand.
Okay, so when we divide by 2, the y is now by itself. And now let's take a look at our slope. So everybody look. 1 negative sign, it will stay negative. Okay, so we don't need to worry about that. Then as far as 5/2 go, if you do not know if 5/2 reduces, the only thing that you can really do is you can't type it that way in the calculator using the ABC button. It turns it into a mixed number. Remember yesterday I told you to flip it? So instead of typing in 5/2, if I type in 2/5, it stays the same. Well, if 2/5 stays the same, wouldn't 5/2 stay the same? Yeah. So that's a way that you can check it. Just make sure that even though you're flipping it in the calculator to check for the reducing, you don't flip it here. Like, I don't want to see you guys accidentally write 2/5 because you flipped it in the calculator. We just did that to check to see if it reduced. And then the second part, what's negative 10 divided by 2? Negative 5. So now we have slope-intercept form for number 1, and we'll be able to graph that.
We're not gonna be able to go down and right with it.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and identify, I'm gonna write it up here. My slope is negative 5/2, which means typically I would go down and right, and then my y-intercept is the negative 5. So I'm gonna plot the negative 5 first on the y-axis, and then if I'm supposed to go down right, and I start trying to count down 5, obviously I run out of room. So I cannot go down and right, so you have to switch both directions. So where do I go instead? Up and left. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to count up 5, left 2. And then I'll do it one more time. Up 5, left 2. So you still can fit 3 points on there. We just couldn't go the direction that we usually go because we ran out of space. We started too low with that negative 5.
I can't wait until my truck flips.
What'd you say?
So I can't wait until my truck is fixed so I can get it too.
All right, now problem number 2, I wanted to make sure we did that one together because that X out front doesn't have a number in front of it, and we need to move it to the other side. So what do I typically tell you guys to do if there's not a number there? Put a 1 there. Okay, so 1x minus 3y equals negative 12. I just wrote the equation under the graph. So how do we move a 1x? Subtract it. Yep. Okay, so on the left side, we're going to bring down that negative 3y. Don't forget that negative sign with it, since there's a minus sign. And then on the right side, negative 1x minus 12. You just keep those two terms separate and just write them side by side. And then what number are we dividing everything? Negative 3. All right. Y equals. Okay, now when you guys look here, the good news is that fraction has a 1 up top, which means it can't get any smaller than that, so that will not reduce. But if you have two negatives, what happens? It turns into a positive 1/3 x. Also, I should have mentioned this before. Do you guys notice where I keep writing my letter x? I keep putting it next to that fraction bar. You are not allowed to write that x on the bottom. It either has to be up top with the 1 or it just needs to be next to that fraction bar. Okay? So if any of you guys typically do this with fractions, you can't really do that here because see how the x looks like it's on the bottom with the 3? So you don't want to do that. I mean, I like to write my fractions that way too, but for this purpose, write it straight up and down and just put the x next to it. Okay, now this part, the division part, what's negative 12 divided by negative 3? Positive 4. Okay, so here is your slope-intercept form. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to put m equals and b equals. So our slope is what number? 1/3. And then my intercept is the 4. And that's the one we plot first on the y-axis. Okay, now with a positive 1/3 slope, where am I supposed to go?
Upright.
Up, right. Okay, well the good news is we can, and we can actually do it twice, right? I can go up 1, right 3, up 1, right 3, and it takes us to that top right-hand corner.
And you can do it twice left too.
And as soon as I run out of room going up and right, we're going to go back to our starting point and go down and left. And we should be able to do that 2 more times. So go back to the 4, go down 1, left 3, down 1, left 3. And then just make sure you extend it from edge to edge with arrows. No, because you still have to get the x on the other side.
How would you subtract 5?
Yeah, maybe we should do number 3 together and then I'll let you try number 4 because number 4 is just like number 2. But number 3 has something a little different. So let's just go ahead and do this one together. 5x minus, now what number can I put in front of y?
1.
A 1 equals 0. Okay, so we still, the y is not by itself, so we still have to move the x term. And if that's a positive 5x, what do? We're going to subtract 5x from both sides of our equation. Now notice that is not just a 1y, that is a negative 1y. If it were a positive 1, we would not have to do the division because dividing by 1 doesn't change anything, right? 5 divided by 1 is still 5. Negative 2 divided by 1 is still negative 2. Now on the right side, I'm going to start with my negative 5x. And then normally we don't write zeros, but I'm just going to go ahead and put it there because don't we need to have a y-intercept? Like, don't we have to have a number there? So I'm going to just leave the 0. Normally I wouldn't, but for graphing purposes, I will because I'm going to need a y-intercept. And then what's the number in front of y?
1.
Negative 1. So make sure when you guys do your division, you show that you're dividing by negative 1. So then these cancel each other out, and we finally have y by itself. Bring down the equal sign. And then negative 5x over negative 1. Now that actually does divide, doesn't it? Negative 5 divided by negative 1 would be what? Positive 5x. And 0 divided by anything? 0. So your equation would look like this. And when we identify our slope, if it's just 5, what can I put underneath it? A 1. And then our y-intercept would be the 0. So your starting point is the origin. The origin. That 0, 0. And then with a positive 5, we would go up 5, right 1. Now you're only going to be able to do that once. So we're going to start at 0, count up 5, right 1, put a new dot. Do I have room to go down 5 and left 1? Yeah, so go back to your starting point, go down 5, left 1. Then as soon as you guys connect those points, I would like you to try number 4 on your own. And like I said, if you need a reference, it's just like number 2. The steps are pretty much the same. So I'm just going to freeze the screen so you can't see it. And I'll work it out myself and then we'll compare. Oops, let me get rid of my hand. There you go. All right, so this is what it looks like. See if you guys got this. See if you got what I got. I'll tell you my steps. I subtracted 1x. So I brought down my negative 2y, my equal sign, negative 1x I put first. Now this time the 10 was positive, so you should have had a plus 10. And then I had to go through and divide everything by negative 2. So when I did that, notice your slope has 2 negatives. And when you have 2 negatives, it turns positive. So it's positive 1/2 x. And then a positive 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. How many of you guys got that equation? 1/2 x minus 5. Oh, that looks good. Good job. Okay, and then those of you guys that didn't get it, as long as you can see where you messed up and you understand what it was, then you're okay. Sometimes it could just be a sign issue. And then our slope was positive 1/2. Our intercept was negative 5. So we would start down here close to the bottom. And with a positive slope, we go up and right.
We did it wrong.
No, you plotted your negative 5 on the x again. I saw your dot there on the negative 5.
I
Yeah.
plotted mine on the y.
Okay, so it's right here, and then we're going to go up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2. So far I have 4 points, and I still have room to go down 1, left 2. Just once, but you can get a 5th point in there. That's the end of your standard form notes. Okay, so I want you guys to make sure you keep that because you'll want to refer back to those notes when you are getting ready for your test next week.